Why do I need to read in English? My students often ask me this. They think, I go to classes, I do my homework, I watch films in English. Why should I read books? Actually, reading is the best way to improve your English. I will tell you why. First, reading is very important now. In 2006, only 1 in 100 people went to university. Now, 7 in 100 people go to university. All jobs need more reading and writing than 100 years ago. This is true for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're an office worker or a mechanic. Second, reading will improve your speaking, writing, vocabulary and grammar better than any other way. It won't improve your listening, but it will improve your vocabulary. And when you have a better vocabulary, you can listen more easily and improve your listening that way. In school, you probably read lots of English. You probably read boring textbooks and stories with exercises at the end. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about reading for pleasure. That means reading a book you enjoy because you enjoy it. You are not reading because your teacher said, read this book. You are not reading because you think, I should read this book. You are reading because you want to. In 1965, they did an experiment in schools in America. These schools were for boys who had done crimes. For example, some of them stole things. They gave some of the boys free books. They were fun books, like James Bond. They said, you can do what you want. You don't have to read the books. But the boys did read the books. They read a lot of books. Some boys read a book every 2 days. After 2 years, they gave the students a test. The students who got the books got better at reading and writing, and they liked school more. The students who did not get the books did not get better at reading and writing. Actually, some of them got worse. This isn't just true for native speakers. They also did an experiment on students learning English in the Fiji Islands. They used 3 ways to teach. The first way was normal English teaching. They did grammar classes, exercises and so on. The second way was reading in silence. The students read books in class. The third way was reading together. The teacher read books to the students. After 1 year, the 2 ways with reading were the best. They were much better than the students who did normal English classes. They did the experiment again in Singapore. There, the students who read in silence did very well. They did the best in grammar tests. Other students did grammar classes, but they did worse in grammar tests. In normal classes, we try to remember grammar and vocabulary. When we read, we learn them naturally. Maybe you're thinking, when I read in English, it's too hard. I have to use the dictionary all the time. It's boring. I can't do it. I understand. So I wrote this book. I think this book will make you like reading. Because the stories are easy and fun. The early stories are short and easy, and the later stories are longer and harder. When you finish the book, you will think, wow, I did it. I make a podcast called Easy Stories in English. 9 of the stories in this book I wrote for Easy Stories in English. One of the stories I wrote for this book. But when I made this book, I made the stories better. Now you can read the stories at beginner, pre-intermediate, intermediate, or advanced levels. The stories are all fairy tales. Some are very popular fairy tales, but some are not so popular. One of them I wrote myself. Maybe you're thinking, fairy tales. Fairy tales are for children. I need useful vocabulary. I need to learn about business and science. That can't be fun. Actually, the vocabulary in these stories will be useful. Macquillan did an experiment where he looked at vocabulary in 22 novels. 85% of the words were on academic word lists. These are lists of words that you need to know to study at university. Rolls and Rogers also did an experiment. They said, if students read 1 million words of science fiction, will they learn important science words for studying at university? The answer was yes. So yes, fairy tales are useful for you, too. But I understand if you still don't believe me. When I learned about all this, I found it hard to believe, too. But I like to try new things, and I love learning languages. So in 2017, I decided to do an experiment. I had wanted to learn Spanish for a long time, but I didn't learn much in normal classes. I said, I will read 1 million words in Spanish. Afterwards, I will see what my level is. 1 million words is about 20 novels, so it was a lot of work. I started with very easy reading, like this book. Then, I decided to take my reading to the next level. I started reading translations of books that I was already familiar with in English. This was a great way to improve my Spanish skills, while still enjoying stories I loved. For instance, I had already read the Harry Potter series in English, so I decided to read it again in Spanish. It was amazing to see how much more I could understand and appreciate the story in another language. I could focus on the plot and characters without struggling to comprehend the language. Similarly, I had devoured the Game of Thrones books in English, so I read them again in Spanish. It was like experiencing the magic of Westeros all over again. But this time, with a new level of understanding and appreciation. By reading translations of familiar books, I could build my confidence and fluency in Spanish, and it was a lot of fun. Finally, I felt ready to take the next step. I started reading new books in Spanish, authors I hadn't read before. I discovered the wonderful world of Latin American literature. And it was a game changer. I fell in love with the writings of Isabel Allende, Luis Jorge Borges, and Manuel Puig, among others. These authors opened my eyes to new perspectives, cultures, and ways of thinking. I was fascinated by their unique styles, their use of language, and the stories they told. Isabel Allende's historical fiction swept me away to another era. Luis Jorge Borges' philosophical short stories made me think deeply about life. Manuel Puig's poignant novels touched my heart. Reading these authors in Spanish was a revelation. I felt like I was experiencing their works in a more authentic way, without the filter of translation. I was immersed in the language, the culture, and the stories. It was an incredible feeling, like a whole new world had opened up to me. I was grateful for the journey that had brought me to this point, and I knew that I would continue to read and explore in Spanish for years to come. In addition to reading, I also enjoyed listening to podcasts. However, I didn't just stop at listening. I took it a step further by reading the transcripts of the podcasts as well. This helped me to improve my reading skills and also allowed me to add new words to my goal. As I continued to read and listen, I started to feel more confident in my language skills. And then, something amazing happened. I finally reached my goal of reading 1 million words. It was an incredible feeling, knowing that I had accomplished something so significant. But I didn't stop there. After reaching my goal, I started writing in Spanish and speaking with native speakers. This was a great way to practice my writing and speaking skills. And it helped me to improve my language skills even further. I was able to have conversations with native speakers, understand their perspectives, and share my own thoughts and ideas. It was an incredible feeling, being able to communicate in a new language and connect with people from different cultures. I was at a level where I could understand most of what I read. When people spoke clearly, I could follow along easily. I was getting closer to fluency, but I still had some work to do. I could read books and understand almost everything. But sometimes I had to look up a word or two. When people spoke slowly and clearly, I could understand them just fine. But if they spoke too fast or used complicated words, I might get lost. I had reached a point in my language journey where I could understand most of what I read. Whether it was a book, article, or even a conversation, I could follow along easily as long as people spoke clearly. I was making great progress and getting closer to fluency, but I still had some work to do. Reading books was becoming easier, and I could understand almost everything. Occasionally, I'd come across a word or two that I didn't know, but a quick look at a dictionary would help me out. When people spoke slowly and clearly, I could understand them perfectly. However, if they spoke too fast or used complicated words, I might struggle to keep up. Despite the challenges, I was motivated to keep improving. I practiced every day, reading, listening, and speaking in English. And with time, I noticed my skills getting better and better. I was confident that with consistent effort, I'd become fluent in no time. But I want to emphasize something extremely important. When it comes to reading, it's crucial to choose books that are easy to understand. You should enjoy the process, not struggle through it. Remember, the goal is to learn and have fun at the same time. When you're reading, make sure the book is at a level that feels comfortable for you. If you find yourself struggling to understand the words or getting bored with the content, it's time to move on. Don't force yourself to finish a book that's not holding your interest. Instead, put it down and search for another one that sparks your curiosity. Look for books that make you feel happy, excited, or curious. Reading should be a pleasurable experience, not a chore. By choosing easy and fun books, you'll be motivated to keep reading and improving your language skills. When you read very easy books, you'll have a great advantage. If you come across a word you don't know, you'll be able to understand its meaning easily. You won't need to use a dictionary or struggle to figure it out. This is because easy books are written in a way that makes sense to you, even if you're not familiar with every single word. But what exactly makes a book easy? Researchers have found that you should be able to understand at least 98% of the words in a text for it to be considered easy. That might seem like a high percentage, but it's important to remember that learning a language should be enjoyable, not frustrating. When you read easy books, you'll build your confidence and improve your language skills without even realizing it. You won't have to worry about feeling overwhelmed or stuck. Instead, you'll be able to relax and enjoy the story, learning new words and phrases along the way. So, don't be afraid to start with something easy. Your language skills will thank you. Let me show you an example to make this clearer. Imagine you're reading a text where 10% of the words are made up, like flirged, bimped, porfa, tondling, and vinky. This means you should be able to understand the other 90% of the words easily. The text says, Jerry flirged out of bed and opened the curtains. He bimped to himself as he made breakfast. He made coffee and put butter on his porfa. Even though you don't know what flirged, bimped, and porfa mean, you can still understand the general idea of what Jerry is doing. Suddenly, someone calls his phone and he picks it up. He's very surprised by who is on the phone, and his vinky falls on the floor. You might be wondering what a vinky is, but you can guess that it's something that can fall. This example shows that even when you don't know every word, you can still understand the main idea of a text. And that's what matters most, understanding the story, not every single word. Let's compare two texts to see which one is easier to read. The first text had 10% made-up words, while the second text has only 2% made-up words. That means you should understand 98% of the words in the second text. The second text says, Jerry jumped out of bed and opened the curtains. He sang to himself as he made breakfast. He made coffee and put butter on his toast. Someone called his phone, and he picked it up. He was very surprised by who was calling, so his vinky fell on the floor. Reading this text is much more enjoyable than the first one, right? Even though you might not know what vinky means, you can still follow the story easily. That's the magic of reading for pleasure. You don't need to understand every single word to enjoy the story. You can just keep reading and guess what the unknown words mean based on the context. Reading for pleasure is great because it allows you to learn new words and phrases naturally, without feeling overwhelmed or needing to use a dictionary. You can just relax and enjoy the story, understanding enough to follow along. That's why it's so important to choose books that are fun and easy to read. If you find this book too challenging, don't worry. Just put it down and pick up something easier. And if you're finding it boring, well, that's not fun at all. Move on to something more enjoyable. Everyone has different tastes, and that's okay. The important thing is to find a book that's right for you. When we're having fun, we learn so much more. That's why I wanted to make this book an enjoyable experience for you. I deliberately left out exercises, because I don't think they're the best use of your time. Instead, I want you to keep reading and exploring new stories. If you finish this book, you can move on to the next level. And because you'll already be familiar with the stories, you'll find it easier to understand. So, keep reading, and most importantly, have fun. But who knows, maybe after finishing this book, you'll discover a passion for stories. I truly hope so. If you do want to read more, I have some exciting news for you. I create a new story every week, with both audio and text. On my podcast called Easy Stories in English. There are already over 100 episodes waiting for you to enjoy. I'd love for you to continue learning and improving your English skills while having fun. So, feel free to tune into my podcast and explore more stories. Happy reading and happy learning. I was at a level where I could understand most of what I read. When people spoke clearly, I could follow along easily. I was getting closer to fluency, but I still had some work to do. I could read books and understand almost everything, but sometimes I had to look up a word or two. When people spoke slowly and clearly, I could understand them just fine. But if they spoke too fast, or used complicated words, I might get lost.